Evening, everyone, and better hit the got it here. Absolutely. We'll talk about that too. Good evening, everyone. Rod Kuntz, co-hosting the show with my partner, Jim Riley, tonight. And we have special guests, but before we get to that, we're going to run through a few rules of the call just so we're all on the same page. First, please put your mute on your computer until you've been called on during Q&A. And do not record the calls on your phone or other devices. They are private for members only. For the syndicate, you will be able to rewatch them on the membership site. Please maintain a professional tone while asking questions in any discourse. And poor conduct, we've not ever had an issue with any of our folks, but we have to, I'll just bring it up anyway, just to say, let's keep everything on the up and clean. You never know who is going to be watching something. And so just mind your manners. News updates, we always want to cover anything that's new. And I think that the biggest news that we've had is the Republican candidate filing event in Helena this weekend. And if there's some opportunity in the call, maybe we'll have some people weigh in on that. I have a feeling that we're going to be so packed with information from Mr. Nunnally that we're not going to make it there, but that's good. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Sam Nunnally, and I asked him to give me an updated biography. And I've known Sam just for a couple of years, but I've known of Sam for much longer than that. And that's to his credit as being someone who's active in our community. And if there's any question that one man can make a difference, or one woman can make a difference, one person can make a difference, I think you're going to see it with our guest tonight. So Sam has worked for over 20 years in the health and information technology field. And he is currently the new manager of the Flathead County Fairgrounds with tons of responsibility there. Over 20 years of search and rescue, volunteer, board of directors, and a search leader. 25 plus years as a sheriff posse member, quartermaster, captain, alternate commander, and commander. Glacier Country Pachyderm for over 4 years on the board of directors. 10 years on the Flathead County Fair Board, 7 years as the chairman. Any wonder that he's now the manager of the county fairgrounds. He's organized various short-term organizations for emergency responses. He's spent the last 2 years also as an elected official on Kalispell City Council for Ward 2, a very fast-growing ward in Kalispell. 2 years as the National Federation of Pachyderm Board of Directors. Over 2 years at the National Federation of Pachyderm Executive Board. He was a secretary, and he's now, as of just a few days ago, actually, the newly elected first vice president of the National Federation of Pachyderm. So a pretty big deal. And so we're really lucky to have you here tonight, Sam. He's also advised and managed various political campaigns throughout the Flathead Valley. And he's assisted with starting Pachyderm Club, a Pachyderm Club in the Seattle areas and Everett, Washington area, I think King County, if I'm not mistaken. And I love this part of Sam. And if all of us could put this on our bios, I think it would help all of us. He says, I'm a sucker to help people when asked a question. And that's the true heart of a servant leader right there. If somebody asks a question, you don't just answer it, but Sam's a go-to guy. And we're absolutely floored to have him, lucky to have him here. And he's going to share a wealth of information. So what's going to happen is he's going to give us about 20 minutes of his thoughts. And of course, you saw our topic tonight, the importance of affiliate, being an affiliate situation, when you're running for office, and the importance of those political alliances. And so he's going to some time on that, about 20 minutes, and then we're going to use the rest of our time for questions and answers. And I'm sure we're going to get some fun stuff out of that. So Sam, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm even going to mute myself, and give us your take on the world as you see it in politics.
Wow, that is a loaded question, right? Especially nowadays with politics the way they are. when I first got into really involved in understanding politics was ninth grade. My history and government teacher, Mr. Newman at Flathead Christian School, where I went and graduated from. He was just a great leader. Now, I grew up in a household where my mom was Democrat. My stepdad worked at the fire department at Kalispell, strong Democrat. I always assumed I was a Democrat, just kind of family traditions. And I'll get back to that in a little bit on another story about King County. But it was Mr. Newman. I was sitting in his class. I'm like, boy, this guy is just a crazy old coot, the way he's talking about all this stuff, right? It just wasn't making sense to me. But then I one day got into an argument with him, and he pulled me out of the room, pulled me into a little, what was really a closet, but it was the library that we had at the Christian school. And he sat down and we went toe to toe on topics, left and right. And by the end of that meeting, I realized, you know what, I'm not as much of a Democrat as I always thought I was, just because of my family. I actually believe in some of this Republican and conservative values. So that was really my start into understanding and really digging into politics on both sides. Moved on, grew up, worked in retail, started working at a hospital, and I started getting involved politically. Once I got on to search and rescue and the posse, just seeing how the sheriff and that dynamic works in politics and the county commissioners, and it made me excited. I watched city council every week. I would turn on the local access and I'd watch Rod there at city council, and I learned a lot from that. And I count myself as still a very strong conservative Republican, even though now today, sometimes people may not count me as a Republican because of whatever topic it is. I'm finding that very interesting nowadays, where you can be a strong Republican, say one thing, and all of a sudden you're a rhino or something else. I see that as something that is tearing down at both parties, as it should affect the other side, hopefully, but I see how it also affects our own party in today. But decided I'd get a little bit more involved, worked on a campaign for sheriff, worked on a few legislative campaigns. My father lived out in the Seattle area, and he wanted to start, and I joined Pachyderm. Let me back up. I joined Pachyderm and got involved there politically. And my dad out in Seattle had a little group of guys that they'd go to the restaurant, and they called themselves Pachyderm. And I thought, wow, I didn't realize there was a Pachyderm club in Seattle. Well, it wasn't. It was just the name they'd picked for the club. And I said, you know, Dad, really, we should try to look at maybe making that into a Pachyderm club. Now, if you look at the state of Washington, it's a blue state, right? But as a whole, it's a blue. But if you dig into Washington, there are 3 counties that make it go blue. And that's King County, Pierce County, and Snohomish County. And so my dad and I was over here in Montana. He was, of course, over there. We started a Pachyderm club. When we started that Pachyderm club, you could say you were a Republican and you were going to get shot. It didn't matter from who. Even those in the Central Committee over there did not want people saying they were Republican. They were scared of that because they were so beat down as you know, from the Democrats beating them down, they wouldn't even stick their head up. But we realized that if we just bring some of that education, like Mr. Newman did for me, and what Pachyderm does for the rest of areas where we have Pachyderm clubs, we bring that education and people realize maybe they aren't always Democrat. We thought, if we can put a little bit of blush in Washington, maybe we can just flip Washington. Wouldn't take much if you look at Spokane, and of course now politics have changed in Spokane, but if we just add that blush in, maybe we could flip it. And did we flip the state? Nope, we didn't flip the state. Instead, it got very political. The Democrats did a very good campaign against my dad over there. And then the Republicans started the campaign against my dad over there because he was making too many waves. He was changing the way they looked at it. They just did not like that. We were able to convert one person who was the stalwart Democrat of Washington. He was the insurance auditor over there, longtime Democrat. His dad was Democrat. His grandpa was a Democrat. When my dad asked him, "Why are you a Democrat?" he said the same reason I did when I was there with Mr. Newman. Well, because my family is all Democrat. And that changed when my dad said, "Have you read your platform?" And then handed the Republican platform to him and said, "I think you should read this too." And that person flipped from being a Democrat to a Republican. That can happen across this country as we keep working on this. But the problem is we need to drop the whole idea that we have to chase the rhinos out of the party, because too easily people are getting labeled a rhino when really they're Republican. They may not just believe everything that you absolutely believe at that moment in time. I'll use this as an example for that. This last legislative session in Montana, a Republican value is local control. And the Republicans in Helena this last session took away local control when zoning. Now, I totally agree with what they were trying to do, but let me give you the example of what happened. City of Whitefish was allowing inclusionary zoning. I don't agree with inclusionary zoning. I think it is totally wrong. But one of the Republicans decided he'd champion that we're going to shove it to Whitefish and we're going to take away inclusionary zoning for them. The citizens in Whitefish were getting frustrated with inclusionary zoning enough that they were looking at changing city council in Whitefish from a very, very Democrat leaning council and looking at going more conservative on that council. But as soon as the Republicans in the state took away local control, it gave cover for the Democrats to keep that stronghold in Whitefish. And they have one counselor on there that's pretty good conservative guy, Giuseppe. I haven't had a chance to meet him yet, but I really look forward to meeting him someday. But that's where we need to be careful when we start targeting our own, and what some of us in Pachyderm have called eating our own, where we have new people come into the Republican conservative. We need to nurture them and educate them and grow them, because they will become strong Republicans. They will become conservative. But if we just throw them out to the wind and call them a rhino and just throw them out, our party is going to get really small really quick. So those are some of the things that I have worked on over the years. I don't want to take a whole lot of time. I know Rod said 20 minutes. I didn't quite have a full 20 minutes there, but he also said that there were going to be a lot of questions and stuff. And that's really where I get most of my get going juices on talking. So I'll open it up right now. Are there any questions at this point?
Yeah, Sam, thank you for your points on Pachyderm. And as I learn more about the importance of the group itself, I realize what a value it is. Can you talk about the precinct captains and what their role is and how we keep them actively involved in the weekly Pachyderm meetings?
Sure. I would hope that all precinct captains and committee men and committee women would be getting out and coming to Pachyderm. Pachyderm is that place for that education to happen. We're a Republican organization, right? But we strongly believe that an active citizenry is where we set this country on a straight path going forward. And that's through education. And, if you decide you want to be a committee man and committee woman, and you didn't quite know what it was, I would suggest finding a Pachyderm in your area. If you don't have a Pachyderm, reach out to me, or Suzanne Feather is our national executive director. We can help you set up a Pachyderm in your community also. But really, that committee man, committee woman, they need to be that boots on the ground, getting out there, knowing their precinct, right? Where do the Democrats live? Where do the Republicans live? How do you work with your candidates that are representing you and the people in your area the best? And sometimes, and I'll admit, when I became a precinct person, I didn't even fully understand that going into it. And I didn't do probably the best job that I could have while I was on there, because I was still fairly new in it. But it's going and finding those other people, not just Pachyderm, but Central Committee, working, with your others there to try to figure out what those plans are and how you can best deliver that message to your people. Now you're going to find people that, yeah, they may be, Rod, in your district, one of our representatives has been Frank Garner. A lot of people love him or hate him, whether you like him or not. I'm not here to say yay or nay. A lot of people like to call him a rhino, but in his district, 40% are Republican, 40% are Democrat. That 20% is really who you have to capture. Mm-hmm. And that precinct committee man and committee woman, they're the ones that should be figuring out their community of what impacts them the most to get those votes for that area and work closely with your candidates. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it does. And thank you for that. By the way, I didn't realize how important a precinct captain could be until recently. I'm actually in my area. We've got a couple people running for school board. And for anybody that's watching this call, if you can find out who your precinct captain is, just like what Sam said, you could leverage their inside knowledge of the community, who lives where those 40% Dems, where the 40% Republicans are, and then that mysterious 20%. And we're actually going to leverage our Pachyderm precinct captain right now for the 2 school board runs, as well as a couple other races that are happening in this area as well. And thank goodness that I was at the right meeting at the right time and asked the question. So if you're listening, Sam, it's a great group, but there's extensions of that I think we could do a better job letting people know about, and then leveraging them in your own areas.
Yep. And I do want to just be a little careful there. Pachyderm, we are a Republican affiliated group, right? The Republicans understand us, we understand them. But in the same respect, we are not Central Committee. We don't take over where Central Committee is. That's really where that needs to be. Where Pachyderm is, where it's very helpful, is if you have a topic, if your precinct committee man or woman from the Central Committee says, hey, you know what, in my area, this is my talking point. It's health board, it's the jail, it's whatever it is, right? Find that talking point and then talk Pachyderm into saying, hey, can we have a topic on this? Pachyderm, we're Republican, but it doesn't mean the speaker has to be Republican, right? Could be a Democrat. Because where do we learn what the other side is going to do? From the Democrats. So, and then that becomes a dangerous part, because you don't want everyone to, if you have a Democrat come in, everybody wants to just lambaste that person, because they're the dirty enemy. But in a Pachyderm environment, we try to, where we're talking education, we want their point of view so that we know where our point of view is if we're off, so we can best address it. So hopefully that clears that up.
Sam, I think that is a very important point, because it's tactics, whether it's business tactics or it's military tactics. You need to know your opponent. And this is something we've talked about on a previous call. One of the important things is knowing who your enemy is, or knowing I shouldn't even say enemy, but your opponent, and they are our opposition. And if we're going to win those people over, and part of those might be that mysterious 20%, how do we get into their psyche? So learning that and being able to be around people and figuring that out is important. And so that's a very important part of Pachyderm. I think the other part that maybe you can speak to a little bit is how Pachyderm can actually prep candidates for their run, as far as, not only getting involved, but meeting people. And I know, for example, Mayor Johnson, that you work with right now, he credits Pachyderm for getting him involved in politics and his success in politics. And if you could speak to that a little bit, how that affiliation has actually helped develop candidates.
Oh, well, I'll tell you the story of Todd Bernhardt. A couple of you on this call may know Todd. I worked with Todd over at the hospital in health information technology. And Todd and I were talking one day, and he goes, I'm kind of Republican conservative. I think I'd like to know more about it. And I brought Todd to Pachyderm, and now Todd's, I mean, he's like doing all kinds of stuff, right? He's really involved and engaged. And it's finding those folks, getting them involved, getting them in front of those educational times where they can learn about conservative values and learn about being a Republican, right? That's the important thing. I remember when Tammy Fisher was mayor, one of our topics was the airport, right? The city airport. Do we close it? Do we expand it? What do we do? Well, at Pachyderm, we ran a series for 6 weeks, and we brought in literally every side. And probably knowing it was probably only 6 weeks, we probably didn't even get all the sides on that whole debate. But it allowed everyone in that room that was running for office to hear all the sides and understand what it was. Because as you know, Rod, in politics, the way it is when you see it on the news definitely is not the way it is the way you make the sausage, right? It never fails. They always get it wrong, right? We're hearing all about the Fair Bridge Inn right now. There's a topic, the stuff that I have heard that city council has done to the Fair Bridge Inn thing, and it hasn't even come before the city council yet. Right? People just don't get involved. And that's really the biggest thing. Is now I'm kind of going on a diatribe of where our problem is in politics. Both sides have ticked off the electorate so much. Rod, in your district, what was your voter turnout?
30-some%.
And that was one of the most activated races in the Western United States for city councils last year. 30%. 70% of people have gotten to the point where they're just sick and tired of it. They're tired of hearing both sides, and they're refusing to get educated. Where does that take us in the future? What's our long-term plan if we keep down that path? Right? It's another one where Liz Cheney wins another one, and everyone likes to pick on Liz Cheney, but I'll tell you what, Joe Manchin, the Democrats say the same thing about him on their side, right? It comes down to education, voter education. In fact, I was talking with a guy today at lunch. We were just chatting and we're reminiscing about Barack Obama when he ran for office, and for that 6 months afterwards, how many people were seen on the news going, "Where's my free cell phone?" There's uneducated voters right there, dead center.
Yeah.
And that's how do we find those ways to get to them? It isn't by us yelling and screaming at each other. It's through education. Pachyderm clubs, getting that affiliation, working together, showing people that just because they think they're one way doesn't mean that's the way they are.
Sam, I think you bring up a good point, Sam, not only with Pachyderm, but other clubs that are available in our cities and outlying areas, because oftentimes people don't know where to get connected at or what to do. Now, I was fortunate enough, I met an elected official before I got into politics. However, he led me to water, which happened to be the Pachyderm, and I didn't realize the value that I would receive there. Now, this was a year and a half, 2 years ago, at the time of an election cycle where people were very activated and there was a number of groups to go to. But I think the point I wanted to make about this is that the Pachyderm has served me over the long haul because the education side of it, and really a little bit of what you talked about, inviting other types of guests to further education, hear different points of view, which is in turn has made me a better candidate to run for office, because when I knocked on doors, I leveraged the education that I got within the Pachyderm, as well as some other groups, but as a whole, Pachyderm. So when somebody asked me a question while I was knocking at their door, I felt like I had a lot more knowledge. Can you tell me a little bit or talk a little bit about how important education is for the Pachyderm to deliver to their guests, and how we can explain that to new people in the communities that just aren't familiar with what the term Pachyderm is?
Sure. So really, like I've been saying, Pachyderm's all about that educational component. getting that message out there. Really, you said it, Jim. I've said it. It's not just on those folks out in the community to just blindly walk into Pachyderm and find that message. It takes friends. We are all friends. We're all on this same side, right?
Mhm.
We're all working for the same goal and the same ends. And to do that, it's finding those friends that you think are, you know, they may be middle of the road, they may be a little bit on the right, they may be a little bit on the left. Invite them into a Pachyderm in your club if you have a Pachyderm close to you. Now, Pachyderm isn't all across the United States yet. We are certainly working that way. We're growing. It was started by a legislator in Missouri, down the Cape Girardeau area, that it was his way to get information from what was going on at the legislation back to his community. And so that's why we believe in that education, because that's how we hear it, right? That's how you get the news straight from the horse's mouth. And so it's very critical to have that education, but that education lies in the responsibility of each one of us to pass that knowledge on and invite people in.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, we could have a huge marketing campaign dollar fund, but when it comes right down to it, it's word of mouth. It's you, me, let's be a community. Hey, why don't you come to my community event and hear this?
Sam, I think it's so important. It's so easy. I think Pachyderm, because it is an educational format. I've invited so many people to this because it's neutral. Hey, come listen to this interesting topic, or come listen to this person. And you can invite, like you said, it doesn't matter if they're left, right, or if you don't know. You can invite people in, and then they get to meet other people, and they build those connections.
Yep.
And it makes it so much easier than that next stepping stone to either get involved or fuel their own involvement. And that's one of the big benefits I've seen from Pachyderm, and you've really hit on that tonight. So what would you tell the people watching? How do you go about, number one, finding a club, and then, you know, looking at agendas? How would you go about that whole invite thing? Just the nuts and bolts.
So the nuts and bolts of it right now, I would love to be able to tell you to go to our website, but our website is outdated, and we're actually right in the middle of redeveloping our website. So I would love to tell you to go there, but I can't tell you that right now. I would say reach out to your central committee. Ask them if there's a Pachyderm club in your area, your region. And if there isn't, reach out to me. You can reach out through Rod or Jim, and I'll get in touch. If there isn't one right there, I'll get you in touch with people that can help you start one in your area. Because Pachyderm is a critical part that I think if it went into some of these cities that are blue, I bet you we'd turn them red.
You know, Sam, that's a good point that I wanted to touch on. You know, Pachyderm is kind of a neutral zone. There's other groups that are very far right, and I enjoy some of those conversations there. But when you're trying to get new voters and they're not really sure what side of the fence they want to be on, when they go to a Pachyderm meeting, they really can feel comfortable because they're about getting education from the guest speakers, whether it's constitutional, about water rights, you know, power and gas, or you know, the variety of topics that you've covered in Pachyderm. It's a great place to invite people for a neutral ground, maybe get some lunch, break some bread. And what's crazy to me is when you're in those meetings, there's so many like-minded people that look like we do. And it's like, wow, you know what? They're just like me. Maybe they are right, or maybe I could be a part of this.
Yep. And, you know, over the years, certainly I've had those folks that I just don't agree with. But, you know, at the end of the day, when I walk out of that meeting, doggone it, they're still friends. They're still Republicans. I'm not going to sit back and, oh, that person's a rhino because they believe this particular thing. Doggone it, we're all in the same party, and we're trying to move this thing forward. And we're not going to do it separated and divided, right? There is one party that wants to divide us really bad, and we need to fight against that hard.
Yeah. I would also like to compliment the Pachyderm clubs as really kind of a campaign stimulus, if you will. You know, a lot of people announce their candidacy at the Pachyderm meetings, and they get the support and the applause. but also the camaraderie after the meetings or before the meetings, which kind of gives you that energy to go out into the neighborhoods and knock on the doors. So it's really kind of your first step into your campaign run, confidence builder. And then, of course, oftentimes, as you know, because part of the routine is to introduce the elected officials, those
Yep.
elected officials can give advice or be there to answer some questions on the spot. So it really is a wonderful organization to give people an opportunity to confidence build, step off, into the game and move forward on whatever position they're running for office for.
Yeah, over the years, I've heard campaign speeches, probably the 3-minute, the elevator talk from the same candidate. I've probably heard, 100 times in a campaign season when they come before Pachyderm. But it's amazing when they start, they stand up, they're nervous, they just don't know quite what it is. We give them a little bit of feedback. Maybe some people talk to them, hey, coach them a little bit. And that's amazing when it comes into political season and they stand up and they give their elevator speech, their 3-minute little quick door knock speech, and they are spot on. It is, you nailed it, Jim. That is a place where candidates can really safely vet out, and sometimes you'll get some folks that'll go a little overboard, but for the most part, it's a safe area to really vet out your campaign speech, printing materials, whatever.
Hey, we've got a few people running for office on the call. Is anybody outside of Rod and I that might have some questions? I know a couple had to drop off. They sent me messages, but the ones that are still on there, any questions specifically? I could probably ask Sam questions all night long, but that might not help you at this point.
And I'd like to know, is anybody on the call running?
Yeah,
What
we've
you running
got,
for?
yeah, we've got Devin Decker. Jerry's on here. She's got a question. Go ahead, Jerry.
No, I was just waving.
Oh.
I have you on my phone because I couldn't get, I'm sorry, I had trouble getting home tonight in time. The roads were terrible. So I didn't have a chance to put you on my computer. I apologize. So I'm coming in late. I just wanted you to know I was here. I don't know how much you can see me, but you can see me. So.
Oh yeah.
We've got you 100%. Thank you for attending tonight. We appreciate it. Yes, if you're watching this call in the future from a recording, we've got one heck of a snowstorm going on across the state of Montana. I got some text messages from Utah, so they're getting it as well. So,
Jerry, are you running for office? Oh, I think you're muted.
There you go. Go ahead, Jerry.
So I'm going to be running for clerk and recorder.
Here in Flathead?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. I didn't know that you were here. So
Yeah, I'm here in Kalispell.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Oop, I think it muted somehow.
Yeah.
you were saying that to use the pachyderms as like a sounding board or a platform to practice. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So our local pachyderm, we meet at the Eagles there, if you've
Yep.
been there. Yep. So come on down, and when you get ready and you want to announce and you want to say that you're going to run, it's your place where you can sound out your 3-minute elevator speech. Yep.
Great.
Just to bring up Jerry for a minute, she's so bold to be here tonight. Jerry had ambitions to run for a different position, and we found out when the district lines moved that she was no longer qualified for that particular position. Both her and I just came off of a weekend, the GOP kickoff for the candidates that are filing, which was a wonderful experience that I'm sure happens across the country. And what's great about what Jerry's done is not only did she listen to the messaging there, but she realized that there's a national need for people to get involved. And just because you don't fit a certain box at a certain time, it doesn't mean that there isn't another box for you to get into and do a great job for that particular position. My wife was at an event last night, and it was more for preppers in case of the doomsday, right? And God bless them for doing that. But she spoke about Turning Point USA, which is our youth organization. They're across the country, put on by Charlie Kirk. And she said, you know, we wouldn't be here right now talking about prepping if we all had gotten involved earlier on in life, right? If we all had a voice earlier on and we ran for these school boards and county commissioners and all these wonderful positions that are available. And thank goodness that we're doing that now. But the point is, we all know somebody, and I think it's our time to encourage them to run. And those of you that are on this call that are running or watching this later, the work that you're doing or the commitment you're making right now is so critically important. We wouldn't have to have prepper meetings and talk about what we're going to do on doomsday and load up on ammo and guns if we were all doing our jobs early on and instead of being good conservatives, raising our families and making money. So that's my 2 cents, but I'm glad that people are on the call and trying to run for office.
Yep. It is important to get out there, right? I mean, we're going to lose this by apathy, by not getting out there and getting involved and getting our neighbors involved.
Rod, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to throw out there too, watching our time, but with Pachyderm especially, it's so important for all the people who are running for office. If you're not successful in your run for office, or if it's your first run and you're not successful, I've talked to people over the years that ran once and say, oh, I'll never do that again.
Okay.
And that's a quitter's mentality. This will open up doors, and that's what I like about Pachyderm. Is it's not just an educational meeting, right, or an educational group. That I know that's the forum, but it's a training ground. It really is a training ground for up and coming citizen involved activity. And whether that's politicians or whether you sit on a board, an appointed board, if it's not something that you actually have to run for. And there is a lot of power on those boards, and they are set up by elected officials. So it's part of our representative form of government. And there's nothing that, is beneath a politician. If your aspiration is to run for a political office and not just be on a board, you're kind of missing the whole point of how our government works, because that's people on the ground. And it's important to line those boards with like-minded people. And it's what your wife was saying, Jim. If more people had been involved at that level, at all those lower levels, we wouldn't be dealing with these crisis situations at the states and national level. We're still considered one of the free states out here in Montana. Some of the national town hall calls we're on, people, from California, New York, different parts of the East Coast have referred to us as, oh, you're in a free state, and they just wish they could be here. But that doesn't mean we don't have an awful lot of work to do. And so I just appreciate everyone doing that. We've got a hand up, AJ. It's all you.
Hi guys, Amber here. My question, do you know if there's something currently in Bozeman or Gallatin County area? This is all so new to me. I am just kind of going head on in.
That's awesome. So there used to be a Pachyderm down there. Last I heard, that Pachyderm club kind of folded a number of years ago and hasn't. But I would love to see another club down there if they haven't already started coming back. I'll look into that, and I'll make sure that they haven't reformed, and let you know. Can I reach you through? Does Rod or Jim have your contact info?
We do.
Yes.
Okay. I'll find that out and I'll get it to you. If we don't have a club down there, I'll get you in touch with how we can start getting a club down there.
Okay.
Because
thank you.
The Bozeman college towns, they're ripe for it right now. Especially, Jim, you mentioned Charlie Kirk. Man, college towns are getting to that point where they're starting to look a little bit more conservative, a little bit more on the right side, right? Because they've seen the failings year after year after year, and they've saw what their parents sometimes have gotten them into. And boy, Missoula and Bozeman are ripe, I think, for changing.
Hey, Sam, I have a question for you. You probably know the answer to. I've noticed at our Pachyderm meetings that they also have a Zoom call-in option for members. Now, a few minutes ago, I mentioned how important the education arm of Pachyderm is, and the guests. So Amber, just because maybe you can't attend in person to shake some hands, you can still take advantage of the educational side of it, maybe become a member of another city watching on Zooms. And, if you're ever in town for something, you can meet some friends that you've been watching on Zoom. But I think that's a great opportunity to get some education through Pachyderm as well, right, Sam?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And National Board also sends out meetings. So last year I hosted a meeting with a good friend of mine who is Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. If you haven't met Matthew, he is an amazing dynamo. He really is a good guy. We've had Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz and, a number of other folks. We had the chief police of Ferguson, Missouri, when all of that was taken down. He was the chief of police when all of that broke. He was the guy. So we have those national meetings from time to time, and I can send that out, Rod and Jim, you probably will receive those notices as they come up also.
Yep. Yeah. Good question,
So
Amber.
Jerry, if I could give you one quick hint, Jerry.
Yes.
So, and I tell this to folks that are running for something that a lot of people don't understand what it is. Educate people on what the clerk and recorder does. I think back to an election cycle once or twice ago. We had somebody that got into the PSC, and I think the only question that they ever got asked was, do they support the Second Amendment, and how do they stand on abortion? And the PSC has zero control over that. So I think, in your position, I think that's a good one to get out and educate the people. What really does it mean for clerk and recorder? What is the impact, right? In elections, and there's so much, right? So
Right. Thank you.
you probably already know that. I just wanted
Thanks,
to pass
Sam.
that along.
That's good advice for anybody running for office. Know what your lane is and stay in it, and be able to defer the hot topics to the people who are running for those spots. Any final closing thoughts that you have for us, Sam?
I'm just excited for our future in Montana, in the United States. I think we're especially with Brandon, I think we're going to be able to make some headway in this next election. So, I'll leave with one thing. Rod, I don't know how you stand with this. I've talked to a couple of other counselors and folks at city council that have experienced in a county commissioner that have said the same thing. When you finally get into office and you're sitting behind that and you realize what you didn't know all those years of how government really works. Mm-hmm. Take the time now before the election really gets going and learn what your area is so that when you hit that ground, you're hitting it running. I watched city council for the longest time, and I used to sit back in my chair and go, why in the world is Rod voting that way? And then now I get there and I'm like, well, that's why Rod was voting that way. So if one piece of thing that I can give to you advice, if you're going to run for an office, understand the workings inside and out and go with it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. My final thought on that is from somebody who served in an elected thing, and thanks for the shout on that, Sam, that you actually understood why I voted the way I did sometimes. I used to tell constituents all the time, I said, if you had all the information in front of you that I had in front of me, you would have voted my way. So
Right.
There's a lot that goes into it, and you have to be able to share that. But that's why we have a representative form of government. That's why we are a republic. We are leaving it up to somebody else to do all that homework from both sides of the issue and really wrestle that stuff out. So, and there were times I will say that I actually changed my vote, my position on something at the last minute after hearing more public comment. So
Yep.
My advice to everyone out there is don't paint yourself into a corner, be open-minded enough to be willing to entertain an opposite point of view. Because if it hits you at the last minute and you've dug your feet into the sand and you're unwilling to move, you could be making a mistake on behalf of your whole constituency. So be flexible, be open-minded and be flexible, even while you're running. It doesn't make you wishy-washy. It means that you're using good judgment. Mm-hmm. So that's my finals. what I would like to do is thank everybody who made it on this call. Those of you who will be listening later, thank you for tuning in. Make sure that we have your information. Send myself or Jim an email on our website if you have to. You can always ask for information from us. If you missed something on this or you didn't understand it, we'll get back with you. And please invite other people to the call. Syndicate people. We've loaded these things up from out of state and everything else. It's, you'll swing back and forth, but the more the merrier. And we're just helping to spread the word, helping to educate, helping to train, even with the 1776 Syndicate. Inform people that you can about 1776 and what we're doing, what we're all about here. And if you can, if you know someone who wants to and they can't, sponsor them. We'll do that too. Our whole outreach mission here is to help as many people as we can to make our country the best it can be. So with that, I think we'll call it a wrap so everyone can go shovel their driveways. Any final thoughts from you, Mr. Riley?
No, I just want to thank our guest, Sam, Rod, for hosting the call. I will say one thing coming off of GOP, and we'll leave it at this. Kat Comic from our Congresswoman from Florida, as well as Matt Rosendale, a Congressperson from Montana, and all the other elected officials that were at the GOP convention. My big takeaway is this country needs our help. This country needs us to run. What you think and believe is happening in the White House is actually happening. When you think that our borders have a crisis right now, they do. And these people are real people that have showed up. Our Attorney General could not express how bad the border is at Mexico. So if you're listening and you're running or you're thinking about running, the time is now. Get involved. There's a real cry for people to be involved and making a change. So thank you for being here. You know how to reach us. Rod, thanks again for hosting. And Sam, thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate you all. Thank you.